Hello, my friends. If you are wondering how to self-edit your novel, then today's conversation with book coach and author Stuart Wakefield is totally for you. Stuart has been a developmental editor since 2014 and is experienced in helping writers address all of those complex story issues that generally send us mad, right? And all of those issues that can come up in those early drafts as we're working on our fiction. Stuart has experience in theatre, he has experience in broadcast, media, and of course, editing. And he also, and this is so key, folks, he also understands the importance of thorough and compassionate feedback. I don't know if you're anything like me, but sometimes I have worked with an editor who, let's say, doesn't quite understand what compassionate feedback is, and it can be a little harsh on us emerging writers. Stuart's own writing has also won recognition. Most recently, his book Behind the Scenes, which is a hashtag gay romance, has been rated 10 out of 10 by the 2021 Book Life Prize in all of the categories that they judge. Okay, not just one category, but 10 out of 10 for plot, 10 out of 10 for originality, 10 out of 10 for character, 10 out of 10 for prose. So this is someone that you definitely want editing your work. Also, stick around until the end, my friends, because we're going to let you know how you can enjoy a free sample edit of 10 pages of your current work in progress. But for now, I would like to welcome Mr. Wakefield to the broadcast. Stuart, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you here. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So, editing and complex story issues. I would really like to start diving in there. So for me, this whole idea of holes in the plot or holes in the story, we can get to the end of a book and we can have a sense that there's something not quite right. So I'd love for you to talk about that place of like, we sense something's not quite right, but what do we do about it?
And I think in my experience, and I think anyone who will watching this knows, if they have ever read a book, watched a play, seen a movie, and they've come away feeling I didn't like this, but I can't quite put my finger on it. I think we all have a visceral understanding of story. And when we're writing those stories ourselves, sometimes we're just a little bit too close to it, but we know there's something not quite right. And I think that can result in two things. It can result in somebody saying they have writer's block, or it results in that awful story that we tell ourselves is, I'm not a good writer. The worst thing that can happen is people start to panic because they don't know what it is, and they start to give it out to people probably that they haven't really thought about, if they are the right audience. And so the feedback they start to get can become very muddled. And then you get to that sort of crushing point where you look at it so much, you just think, I can't. And you just walk away, and you wouldn't even go to a professional editor, because by this point you've convinced yourself that if you can't understand what the problem with your story is, how is anyone else going to? And more importantly, how will they not savage you? Because you've told yourself that you've written this monstrosity. So just getting back to your question, I think it's there's something wrong with it, you just don't know what. And it's the stories we tell ourselves that prevent us taking sort of positive action.
What comes to mind is how well you describe this moment. And of course, it comes from experience. As writers, we all know what it's like to get into that situation. I think it's really interesting, the point that you made, in the mistake is that we give it to the wrong person to read.
Yes.
We often we might give it to our mum, or we might give it to our best friend, and they're not a professional editor.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you were going to say something.
And I think those people have their own agendas. So, hopefully, if your relationship with your mother is good, she doesn't want to upset you. But I mean, you might be writing paranormal, um, paranormal fantasy, and she likes cozy thrillers. So if she's not your intended audience,
Mm.
and she doesn't know about the audience that you are writing for, she's not equipped, with the best will in the world, she's not equipped to give you that advice. If you have a friend who is a writer, I would strongly take a look at that writer and just make sure that they don't have any would not develop any jealousy towards you,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that could be an opportunity for sabotage.
Mm.
But I have writer friends that I know we don't write in the same genre.
Mm-hmm.
They might be doing better than me, whatever your definition of better is.
Mm.
So I think you get a feel for those people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you get somebody who's passionate about what you're writing and professional enough to give you that kind of thorough, compassionate feedback,
Yeah.
then I think you are onto a winner.
Mm. And going back to your previous answer, where you said, because say here I am, I sense that there's something wrong, but because I don't know what it is, I'm coming to the conclusion that I'm no good.
Yes.
Okay. But what struck me as I was listening to you, I was like, actually, that's a real skill, to sense that there's something wrong.
Yes.
So it sounds like that, that might be a nice place to start, to be like, oh, the fact that I'm sensing that something's amiss
Mm-hmm.
shows that I have enough of a gift to sense that maybe the plot's not working.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, like, here's somebody who's been awarded 10 out of 10 for plot. So tell us a little bit about how you would edit your own holes in your own plot before you might hand it over to somebody else, like how you start to do that work.
Okay, so for me, it's about cause and effect. So everything that happens to your character, even before your novel starts, because my view is that story is backstory. So say you and I, if I was arrested for shoplifting and you were arrested for shoplifting, chances are we would react similarly. I hope. I don't know if you've ever been arrested for shoplifting, but there would be differences in what we're doing. And after that incident, say you were found innocent and I was found incorrectly guilty, how would that change the way we reacted in a shop if we thought we were being watched? So for me, the way a character, or the decisions that a character makes up to the point where your story starts, defines who they are and who they will, and how they will react to situations going forwards, and what decisions those make. So what I'm very careful to do is I map ahead of time what are all the cause and effect things that happen in that novel. And then sometimes I will do that in retrospect as well. I'll work backwards through as
Oh,
well,
that's
just to make
interesting.
sure.
Tell me how that works. I've not heard that before.
Okay, so it will be, I mean, it's relatively straightforward, but the thing is, it's deceptively simple when you describe it. So, say you're writing a romance, okay? So it's normally, A meets B, A starts to have feelings for B, those feelings are consummated, they start to feel that there could be something wrong, and then eventually they break up, and at the very, very end, there's this grand gesture. So we can put all of those things together with cause and effect. But then when you go from the back of it, okay, so I'm about to get on the flight, and this person that I'm going Hollywood romance, okay? I'm about to get on the flight, and the person that I've had this relationship and feelings for has suddenly turned up at the ticket desk and begs me to come back. Why? Based on everything else that's happened up to that point, why would I not take that flight and choose to spend my time with that person. I mean, then you work backwards. So for me, I like to do it both ways. So I like to do cause and effect, and then say, okay, effect, what caused that, and just work backwards.
Yeah.
It seems like for me, it's, measure twice, cut once. Okay.
Yeah.
But it just gives me that understanding of wherever I am in a story, what's going on in someone's mind.
Yeah. And that's, again, that's a really simple diagnostic, because like you say, if we go back to that, I've got this visceral feeling that something's not quite right. And if you're literally looking at every incident in the novel and you're like, is this a cause or is this an effect? And if this is an effect, what caused it? And if this is a
Yes.
cause, what's the effect that comes after it? Like, those are some really simple questions.
Yes.
Which can then, if there's not an answer to that question, it's like, oh, well, there's my hole.
Yes.
Beautiful. I love
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And I love the reverse engineer as well. Like a really nice tip there.
Yeah. It's thorough.
So, well, I mean, again, that's what gives you 10 out of 10. I mean, we attain these accolades because of the effort that we put in. So
Yes.
what I'm hearing from you, Stuart, is you put the effort in, and then you're going to get that reward.
Yeah.
So we've looked at a little bit of holes, we've looked at story, looked at a little bit of cause and effect. I want to talk now about the place that we can get into where we're writing a book and we've been driven to write it because we just can't stop thinking about it.
Yes.
It's like, oh my God, this story's been with me for a decade. Like, it won't leave me alone. I've tried to stop, but I can't. And so we end up just kind of writing the book because we can't not write the book.
Yes.
But when I was reading your blog, there was a very interesting blog post that talked about, wait, what's the point of your story? And that really struck me, because I was like, if we're in this place of we're just writing something because we just have to and we can't stop thinking about it, that to me isn't quite a point. And I often find that when I read a draft of someone's work and they haven't found the point of their story, I can sort of sense that I'm kind of like, why do I care about this?
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how we can get into a place where there isn't a point to our story, and then what the hell we do about that.
Okay. So when we talk about the point of a story, I don't want writers to get worried that it has to be some huge, worthy, like thing that they're trying to do. Okay. If you're writing a romance, and I'll use romance examples a lot because that's what I write and it's what I love to read, but you can boil it down to love conquers all. Most romances that is the point. Okay. If you're reading Harry Potter, so I mean, okay, if you're reading Harry Potter, the first one, Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone, depending on what country you live in, it is, for me, the point is that no matter how alone you feel, your people are out there. So if you have that point when you go in, if you're writing a thriller, it may be that crime doesn't pay. Even if you have that most basic point, it will keep you on target, because if you are writing love conquers all, you have made a promise to your reader. If you're reading a thriller, chances are it is, crime doesn't pay, but you've made a promise, and if you don't pay off on that promise, you're going to have a lot of very unhappy readers. Okay, because you're making your promises on your book covers and in your first couple of pages, ideally, about what it is that your novel, what the point is. So I think as writers start to diverge and start to feel like they're getting off track, again, that's the point where I would take a writer back. So the writers that work with me, I'll probably say 7 or 8 times out of 10, I take them back to what's the point that you're trying to make here. I know obviously that's different with a knowledge sharing book or a memoir, but for the fiction writers I work with, it's pulling them back. What are you trying to say, and who are you trying to say it to? So working out who your intended reader is going to be, where you think your novel, if you're in a bookshop, what shelf are you going to go to for your novel? What books are next to your book on those shelves? Why is a reader going to go to that shelf? What are they looking for when they look at the books on that shelf? And what does your book, if you imagine the books on the shelf are having a conversation, what does your book have to add to the conversation?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Right. So once you've got all of that in your head, who my reader is, what my genre is, what the point is, it is then much easier for you to see as a writer where you're going off beam. Because naturally, chances are you have made some of those decisions subconsciously. And it's getting all of that down on paper. So similarly, the way you journal with your clients, it's getting it down on paper because suddenly it's very real.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the work I do with my clients, I mean, sometimes it can run to, 50, 60 pages of the work that we do with the point, who my ideal reader is, the genre, what are the competitive titles, all of those things. They just bring you in, and it's a course correction tool.
I want to go back to the moment that you might say to a client, what's your point? Because here's what I was thinking. Sometimes when I start work with a new client, not sometimes, most often. So one of my early questions are, what's your dream? What's your goal? What do you want to achieve? Like the life coach's famous question. It's very rare that someone really knows the answer to that question, and they can be quite scared by that. So I'm curious, when you ask your clients, what's the point of your story? Because I'm thinking of the viewers being like, oh crap, like if I don't know, is that a really bad thing? So how many of them succinctly say, this is my point, and how many of them go,
All of them go,
yeah.
Yeah, because it's that's not how you think about a book when you start. So off camera, you and I were talking about something that you're working on, and you started to explain it to me. And after the conversation, I said to you, okay, so in 50 words, how would you describe that? And you said something really interesting to me. You said, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
And the way I work with my writers, and it depends where they are. So if they're starting a new story, I have a story development package. So we ask those questions right off the bat. But if I'm reading a novel and I am not getting a good sense of what it is, I will go back to a writer and just have those little sort of tentative conversations. And to be fair, I've done it to other people. So I remember meeting a friend and we were talking about what we're working on, and she said, what's your story about? And I said, well, okay, right. So it's about these two guys, and they and they meet at this audition, and then, a couple of months later, they both get cast and blah, blah, blah. And she stopped me and she said, okay, what's your story about? And okay, right. So there are these guys who are on this TV show, and it's all getting a bit difficult. And then this one says that, and she stopped me. Yeah. And she said, what's your story about? I said, oh, right, okay. It's about two guys who've fallen in love with it in the making of a reality TV show. And she said, thank you. And I was like, oh, I just kind of like, and that's now what I do with my writers. It's just bring it back, bring it back, bring it back.
I mean, it's so interesting, Stuart, because, for you as a book coach, for me as a life coach, we're not immune to it. We still have our blind spots. So I really love that you shared that story, because I will get called out in the same way. Like I will get called out by my coach being like, what really is your goal? What are you working towards?
Yes.
So,
and it's important. I say that right now, I have a book coach for the books that I'm writing. Okay. So I don't want anyone to think that, and I admire the way that you say that you have a coach. We have coaches for reasons.
Yeah.
We're not just setting ourselves up to be like the pinnacle and the gatekeeper, you know, we have coaches. And I think, do you know, I would be slightly, I'm not sure I would trust somebody who wasn't being coached themselves. Is that a bad thing to say?
Oh no, dude, I'm totally
Oh,
with
okay.
you. Yeah.
All right,
No,
good.
no, because as a coach, how can we be a coach and know the value of being by someone's side, but not value that enough to want someone by our side?
My thinking exactly.
I've got 2 coaches.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I must get another one. I shall get 2 and I shall have 3.
So here's a question then. Now that we're really being open, what would you say is, if you're happy to share,
Yes.
you know, where are the areas that your coach pulls you up, the sort of editorial areas? Because you're, you know, behind the scenes has done really well. So let's talk about some of the things that you weren't able to see that your coach was like, Stuart, we need to talk about this.
Do you know, I for me, it would be, to be fair, I've learned more on the book I'm working on now.
Okay.
So I'm writing a book now. It's set in Cyprus in the summer of 1974. And if you're not aware of what happened in Cyprus in the summer of 74, mainland Turkey invaded the island, the top half, and they took the top third. Okay. And basically the country has been annexed. And it was basically to do with increasing tensions between the Turkish Cypriot community and the Greek Cypriot community. And it all boiled over into mainland Greece and mainland Turkey getting involved. So I'm writing a book about a Turkish Cypriot man and a Greek Cypriot man who meet in that summer. They fall in love, and then and it leads up to the day the invasion starts. And that's where the book ends. And the Greek Cypriot man has to make a decision. What is he going to do? So the book coach that I worked on, now this is interesting. Okay, so I drafted this novel back in 2013, and when I did my master's degree, I converted it into a screenplay, and that was my dissertation. That was my final project. And so my view was, I am going to convert that screenplay, because I did a lot of work on structure with my supervisor, back into a novel. Happy days, job done. My book coach was like, well, no, like, we need to dig into some things. And we need to dig into, you know, why are you writing this? What are you really trying to say?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about relationships. I had the things in there about politics and raising the issue of what's going on in Cyprus. And we had to dig through all of those things. Then we had to dig into, okay, you have all of these characters, but what's really making these people tick? And it was just being questioned. And it was being questioned very gently. And we have gone through about 12 hourly sessions. And the difference between my thinking at the beginning of each of those hours and at the ends of each of those hours are like night and day. And it was mainly pushing me on character. And even some of the characters who don't play a pivotal part, who didn't originally play a pivotal part, by having that conversation about, you know, there's a character, his name is Ilya. Sorry, I have a stammer, and my stammer is not very good today. So sorry.
To be honest, until you said that, I hadn't noticed it.
All right. Okay. My epilepsy medication can fog me as well. So anyway, right. Now I've said it, I'll be fine. Okay. So our character Ilyas, and he was just a secondary character, and we did a little bit of work on Ilyas, like, you know, why is he quiet? I'm like, well, he just is. Like, no, like, why is he quiet? Well, he grew up in the mountains with his grandfather, and his grandfather was really overbearing. So Ilyas has learned not to speak. I'm like, right, okay. So then I get to thinking, okay, so if Ilias isn't speaking, what is he seeing? Like, what does he do? And I was like, actually, that unlocks this complete key, because there is something he does. There's a moment, I don't want to give it away, but there's something that he does without speaking. There's an action that he makes. And he does his thing and he walks away. And it's like, oh, that's a really lovely moment. And it's just digging. And I say, obviously, we do the most of the work on the big characters. And to be fair, I had a lot of that work already done. But it's like now, it's like you and I talking about our process, and that we get coached. You open up more and more possibilities and thinking and reflection. And if you picked anybody that you trusted and you spoke to somebody, it's like going to therapy, isn't it? We can sit on our own, we can think about our problems and try and work through them, but we won't make as much progress as we would if we were sitting with a therapist.
Yeah.
You know, I talking to you for an hour about my book, my thinking would go from at least A to T, you know, because it's just explaining it, saying it out loud sometimes.
Yeah. It's really interesting just listening to you, Stuart, because what I'm getting is the importance of actually being able to talk it through, but also the importance of someone listening and just asking that question.
Yes.
You know, when your coach said to you, why is Ilias silent? And your first response was, well, he just is. We, in our own psyche, we can accept that. But a coach is like, I don't accept that as an answer. There's always more.
Yes.
And so by then saying, no, really, you're then in a position to have to dig deeper. And I think when you're in a safe space, you are able to go there. And going back to what you referred to earlier, when you said, if we don't know what that visceral feeling is, we can then call it writer's block. Whereas we just need someone to hold that space to say, come on, let's just take a few steps. And then you really gain that confidence and you're like, oh my God, it's always possible to dig deeper.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, as a book coach, you always run into the territory, not necessarily when you're looking at characters. Oh, actually, no, this does happen sometimes. You start to dig into a character with an author and you get to that moment and you think, oh, this character's you. And then there's that moment where you're like, do I pull back because I'm not a therapist? You know, but yeah, it is interesting, and you start to see writers get a little bit uncomfortable, and you poke it a little bit, and chances are they will eventually say, okay, right, you know, this person is me. But for me, a lot of the work is always on character. And I mean, don't get me wrong, 3 weeks ago I said to my coach, like, oh, just please start writing this book, like it's been like 9 weeks. Says, no, we have to have this conversation about Ilias. And then I have that moment and I think, oh, that's a really beautiful moment in this story. And at the end of every hour, I'd be like, oh, I'm so glad we've had this conversation today. I really wasn't in the mood at the beginning. And now I'm excited and I'm re-engaged. And I've seriously, when did I say I drafted this? 2013?
Yeah, you said 2013.
I have made more progress in the last 2.5 months than I have in all of those years.
Yeah. I love that you shared that, Stuart, because I think if someone's taking a really long time with a project, they can take it quite badly. I mean, I know I've been in that position, and it is literally like, hey, my friend, when you reach out for that help, the journey does speed up.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's great that you shared that. There's so much gold in this conversation. I just don't want it to end. I want to just, seeing as we're coming to the end, why don't we talk about endings?
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that can be, again, it's like, how do I how do I edit an ending? How do I judge that I've written the right ending? How do I explore possible alternative endings? You know, how would you work with someone if you read it and you got a sense it's not the right ending? How do you know, and how would you work with someone to really uncover the ending that's calling to be written?
And this is quite, again, sounds easy, but it's not. I make my writers write 3 pairs of opening and closing chapters. Right. So there needs to be symmetry. Okay. Like, so when I was doing my screenplay for my masters, I worked with a guy. He's a script editor on Casualty and a producer on Red Rock. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but he said to me, and again, this is that kind of backwards thinking, like, how do you want your character to be at the end? And I said, okay, I want them to have all of these things. Right. Take them all away at the beginning. They mustn't have any of those things at the end, unless they're like James Bond or Indiana Jones, because their characters don't really change. I'm going to get hate now, but you know, like,
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I get my writers to write 3 versions of their opening and closing chapters in pairs. Because like I said, for me, there needs to be symmetry. And you'd be surprised how many writers are like, yeah, but I've already written the opening chapter and I've already written the last. But also, how many authors have actually rewritten their first, second, third chapters 10 or 15 times? Because they sit around to edit their novel and they start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And they go forwards and they run out of steam and then they go off and then they come back and they start at the beginning again. So again, because you've looked at that cause and effect, haven't you? Yes. Okay.
Point
you know,
taken,
you're right. And you know what the point is that we're trying to make?
Yeah.
Love conquers all. Crime doesn't pay. How should it end?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. People in love, people in prison. So again, I think that technique, and you can see writers like, I don't want to. It's like, fine, 45 minutes, 3 times, go. And it doesn't have to be beautifully crafted. You can just, you know, write it like a screenplay and just insert, you know, beautiful description of sunset here and carry on. And it's about getting that symmetry down. But again, I would never look at the ending in isolation of the beginning.
Got it. Yeah. I love that, the symmetry concept, actually, and the real simplicity of what do they have at the end, and then can you take it back and make sure that they don't have that at the beginning? Because that's, again, it seems like a nice way to make sure that there's a story arc, you know, that the character does grow and they're not Indiana Jones or James Bond, so that you know that there's a change. What came to me as you mentioned James Bond, I was like, you know, maybe he's got less bullets in his gun, but that's it. That's the only change.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, he doesn't have some information, and by the end he does have some information. But in terms of a character growth, I don't think those characters grow necessarily. I haven't seen the latest one, but yeah, you kind of know what you're getting with James Bond.
Oh, this is, yeah, like I said, this has really been packed with some really, like, for me, really practical ways that people can look back on their novel and do a diagnostic and really start to hone it and make it into the novel that it's really crying out to be. Now, for those of you watching, you might have remembered I mentioned the free giveaway. So tell us, Stuart, if we are like, oh my God, Stuart sounds amazing, I would really love to know what thorough and compassionate editing he has to offer.
Okay.
Very generous, a free edit of 10 pages of a work in progress. Tell us how we can snag that. Tell us why we might want to snag that.
Okay, so I think you can go to my website, which is thebookcoach.co, not .uk or .com, just co.
We'll put it in the description below as well.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
And if you look on the services page, I do the first 10 pages. I would recommend the first 10 pages because that's where you're making your promise. You're establishing at least one main character. And And the reason I think it's important is because any writer and any editor they work with, there needs to be some kind of rapport, and there needs to be some kind of understanding that this editor gets me, and I like the way this editor works.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would pretty much, well, no, I do always insist on like a half an hour talk. Okay. I'm not a salesman. I did 3 months at an electrical superstore when I started university, and I had to leave. I was that bad. Okay. So I'm not going to try and sell anybody anything, but I think it's important to understand if you have a connection and a rapport.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want a writer just loathing me. Okay. And I wouldn't want to work on a project that I didn't feel interested, I didn't know passionate about, because you want someone who's on your side. You want a cheerleader, but a cheerleader who is honest about the way you're holding your pom-poms. So yeah. so for me, that first 10 pages edit and a half-hour talk, I think is a good way to understand, is this editor going to get me? Do they understand my project? And do they have the same love and passion that I have for it? Because I may have been writing this thing for 3 years. Chances are I'm going to be writing it for at least another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the half-hour chat, especially if you're thinking about doing a bigger package. But certainly in the first 10 pages, I think is really important for both of us, because it has to be a good working relationship.
Yeah. And also the sense I get from that is, especially if someone hasn't had the privilege of having editorial feedback, it can be a real eye-opener to be like, oh wow, this is what being edited really, really can give me.
Yes. And honestly, some people are put off by that. Because no matter how kind and compassionate and thorough I am, some people just aren't quite ready.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I wouldn't want somebody to be spending, 500, 700,000 pounds on a service that I give them when they aren't ready, because it's going to be frustrating for me, and it's going to be horrible for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like it's an opportunity for you to also be like, are my gifts going to be wasted on you? And I can really resonate with that. Like, if someone isn't ready to change, or they just want an editor to say, this is perfect, then they're not going to get the true value of what you have to offer. Yeah. Lovely. I'm going to put up Stuart's socials. Let's get that slide up. So you can find Stuart on Twitter. You can find him on Instagram, and he also has a YouTube channel where there are lovely interviews. So you get to see Stuart in the interview seat.
Yes.
I already want to get you back for round 2. So I do hope that you'll come back, and we will talk more. To be honest, I want to talk more about the romance genre, because it's something I don't know very much about. But what I would love, folks, let us know in the comments, what did you get from this? And if we do have Stuart back, what should we talk about? What gold do you want from Stuart? So that would be helpful to have in the comments. Otherwise, I will simply pick all of the topics that I want to pick your brain about. Stuart, it's been an absolute treat. And folks, thank you for seeing us through. I do hope some of you take up this lovely offer of the 10-page edit, because I know you'll get serious value. And Stuart, I will see you in round 2.
Thank you so much. The round 1 was over too soon. Thank you.
Perfect. Take care, everyone, and see you in the next interview.